I'm going to defer to Marvel Regendan to introduce our first keynote speaker. Marvel has worked closely with the SBA regional and district offices, and they have, over the course of this year, developed working agreements around a number of different business issues. So Marvel.
Thank you, Lynn. Let me just grab my information in front. All right, so our first speaker coming up, and he will be joining us as soon as he's currently perhaps in a meeting. I'm just checking real quickly. So, yeah, we were told that he will be joining us as soon as he gets out of one meeting. So he's a very busy person, gone from one meeting to another. But let me do the introduction to Mike Fong, Regional Administrator of Region 10, Pacific Northwest. Mike Fong was appointed in November of 2021 by the Biden-Harris administration as the U.S. Small Business Administration's new Pacific Northwest Region 10 Regional Administrator. This region includes district offices in Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington, which are home to more than 1.3 million small businesses representing over 2.7 million jobs. Regional Administrator Fong had most recently served with Snohomish County as a senior advisor and chief recovery and resiliency officer, overseeing the spending of the spending of 160 million in American Rescue Plan funding. Mr. Fong was the former senior deputy mayor of the city of Seattle and managed Mayor Jenny Durkin's cabinet and executive team. During the pandemic, he oversaw Seattle's whole government response, leading to the city being the first major metropolitan area in America to reach 70% vaccination of its residents. Also, while serving in his tenure as Seattle's deputy mayor, he worked to ensure the voice of small businesses and the community were included and represented at the table for dialogue and decision-making by city leaders. Having worked for over 2 decades in city and county government in both the executive and legislative branches, Mike Fong has a broad range of experience in budget, policy, and operational issues on the local level. He was born in Spokane, and he's a graduate of University of Washington with a bachelor's degree in political science, and currently lives with his partner and 2 dogs in Seattle, North Seattle. 2 months ago, I had the great pleasure of signing an SBA Strategic Alliance memo on behalf of AHANA with Mike Fong, as well as the city of Spokane. And I look forward to begin providing workshops and trainings to our BIPOC businesses as part of this SAM agreement. That being said, Joel, is there anything that you would like to add regarding the SAM agreement and the SBA's work in the region?
Yeah, absolutely, Marvo. I appreciate this opportunity. I'm not Mike Fong. I'm Joel Nania. I'm the branch manager for the Spokane office of the SBA, and this office covers all of the inland Northwest, Eastern Washington, and North Idaho, which is the venue of our Seattle district office. It's most of Washington state, all of Eastern Washington, of course, and the northern 10 counties of Idaho. And Mike will, ideally, we're running ahead of schedule, so we're not going to take too much time. But what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about our SBA priorities. I know this has been a priority of Mike's as well as our entire agency. And then we are kind of broken this apart into several parts. or pieces. Just a little bit of background on the SBA and what our priorities are. Followed by a fellow by the name of John Dicus. John is our Seattle District Office lead business opportunity specialist. And he is a nationally recognized expert in our SBA 8A program, which we wanted to demonstrate just in terms of, something that the federal government and through the SBA is doing with regard to equity and diversity, and inclusion. But if maybe we could bring up you want to start it with that PowerPoint there, Marvel, that would be great.
Great. And Sierra, let's go ahead and have you take controls over that and bring up the presentation.
There we go. That's our beautiful logo here at the U.S. Small Business Administration. And the next slide is just really, a cover slide for the SBA. If you're not familiar, of course, during the pandemic, they described us as the tip of the spear. And as you all know, which end of the spear gets bloody first. So we've been through a very long, arduous process, helping as many small businesses as we possibly could during the pandemic. And now we're in a position where, even though we still have lots of businesses to help due to the pandemic, we're in a position where we're starting to look forward. And indeed, if our phone calls are any measure of recovery, it's that fewer and fewer are phone calls with regard to EIDL, emergency injury disaster loans, or Paycheck Protection Program loans. We're getting back to our normal course of business, which is to start, grow, and expand. And when necessary, for example, in natural disasters, help small businesses, and in that case, homeowners recover. We really do work to, I think in our agency, I've been with the SBA for over 9 years, have been in business in the Inland Northwest since 1981. And have a good handle on what it is to be in small business and the challenges that represents. But we do certainly work as connectors within the various local economies. So go ahead and go to that next slide. We'll just look at our priorities for 2023 and beyond. Certainly there's a heavy emphasis on looking at things through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Access to capital is critical for small businesses, whether they be startups or expanding small businesses. And we're focusing on community development financial institutions, minority deposit institutions, certified development companies, and microloan intermediaries. And they all have missions to help minority and underserved communities. They really help bridge the gap in financing and allowing minority-owned businesses the ability to grow and, in some cases, recover. And these organizations are designed to help fill those gaps. There is still disparity out there where, for example, Black entrepreneurs are 3 times less likely to be approved of a loan than white entrepreneurs. And the pandemic has actually impacted Black business owners more heavily than others, reducing small businesses owned by Black business owners by 41% in February and April of 2020. So the access to capital is a critical component to rebuilding a business. We do also, I'm going to skip over the federal contracting, the 3rd bullet point, but our technical assistance is really second to none. We've got SBA resource partners through our Small Business Development Center, SCORE, as well as Women's Business Centers and our Veteran Business Outreach Center, designed to provide low-cost or no-cost counseling for small businesses. And certainly, as we get into the nuts and bolts of a program that we're very proud of and that we're working to increase, we want continue to grow that program. Currently, as much as we want to focus on federal contracting, still only roughly 10% of federal agencies' total eligible contract dollars go to small disadvantaged businesses. And those would be Black-owned, Latino-owned, and minority-owned businesses. And we are working hard to increase that base and narrow the racial wealth gap that exists. Along with that, with disaster assistance, certainly climate change is always top of mind and top of subject in the news. And we have ongoing efforts with the SBA in terms of advanced preparation to protect key assets and reopen businesses as quickly as possible to promote a sustainable economy. The physical disasters loans that we have, which was our original EIDL program during the pandemic, still exists, and that's certainly our bread and butter when it comes to recovery from natural disasters. The next slide shows a beautiful picture. Left to right, we have Marvo, and we have Joni Weinkoop with the Spokane Tribe, also Vice President of AHANA. Myself, Carrie Hurd is our District Director for our Seattle District. Mike Fong, who you'll be hearing from in a little bit, is next one to the right. And then Nadine Woodward is the Mayor of Spokane. Several months ago, back in, I think it was March, we met with AHANA, with Marvo and a group from AHANA to talk about the issues that we're addressing today. And the result of that meeting was, over a course of several months, was for us to enter into what we call a SAM, a Strategic Alliance Memorandum. The SAM itself is a nice tool. It opens up discussions, but it's certainly not the end all be all to fix all problems. This event was particularly well covered by the media, and we didn't do it to make ourselves famous. We did that intentionally to shed light on a problem that exists. And as you all know who are listening, oftentimes by shedding light on a problem starts to help fix it. We still have lots of work to do. We still have work to do in our own 8A program, but we're moving forward with AHANA and looking at programs that we can implement to reach the underserved markets that are addressed in our SAM program. The city of Spokane is right along with us and setting a great example, I think, of taking a hard look at their efforts in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion as well. So we're enjoying working with AHANA. We have some great relationships that are developing, and it's been amazing at how that's really grown from this SAM agreement. And I think we've probably had 20 different engagements and discussions resulting from that agreement. So now to get into an example of a program that we work very hard at. We have 4 business opportunity specialists in our Seattle district. And what I'd like to do is turn this part over to John Dykus. He's our lead business opportunity specialist. He works out of our Spokane office and does many things right here in the Inland Northwest, but is also pervasive across our entire district. So John, if you would tell us, give us the highlights of the 8A business development program.
Thanks, Joel. Thank you for the introduction. I am the lead business opportunity specialist for the Seattle district office. They've changed our title multiple times, a number of years, but basically my job as a business opportunity specialist, or BOS for short, is to help small businesses with access to federal government contracting. And what I'm here to focus on today is the 8A business development program, which is a program to help small disadvantaged businesses gain access to federal contracting. And I'm going to go more in depth into it on the next couple slides. So we could start with the next slide. So this slide kind of talks about the different statutes, federal statutes, that give SBA the authority to help small businesses in federal government contracting realm. and gives us the authority to make sure that all federal agencies, how they spend their money, a certain percentage of it does go to small businesses and different categories of small businesses within that. The Small Business Act, that's pretty much established the SBA. It was established in 1953, and then the 8A program was added in 1958. And the 8A program, the reason it is called the 8A program is because it is Section 8A of the Small Business Act. The next statute, it gives SBA the authority to make sure that agencies in the federal government award certain percentages of those contracts to small businesses. Our goal is to make sure that agencies aren't just awarding to the same large businesses over and over again. The idea is to help foster growth within our communities. We have the 8A program, which is for minority-owned businesses. We have the Women-Owned Small Business Program, which is geared toward awarding contracts to industries where women are underrepresented. And then we have the Hub Zone Program, which helps foster growth in areas throughout our country that are high in unemployment and low income. And then we also have the Veteran-Owned Small Business Program, which requires agencies to award certain percentages to veteran-owned small businesses to thank you for your service. So there's a 23% goal that every single agency must award 23% of their dollars to small businesses. And then within that, there is 5% to women-owned small businesses, 3% to Hub Zone small businesses, 3% to veteran-owned small businesses. And on the next slide, it'll explain why, but now it is 12% to minority-owned small businesses. There was an executive order signed by the president in December of 2021, which increased the goal for small disadvantaged businesses, which includes 8A participants, to 11% for FY22. It's now 12% for this fiscal year. And then by 2025, it will be raised to 15%. So that means that every single agency that uses federal dollars must award 15% of their dollars to small disadvantaged businesses. Small disadvantaged business is a business that is owned by a socially and economically disadvantaged business. It also implemented major changes to category management, which gives tier 2 credit for socioeconomic small businesses. The old goal was 0%, or is that tier 0, which is basically a no spend. It also reinforced the importance of our goals. And then what we've seen in the last 10 years is that we're seeing a lot of decline in the small business supplier base. So what we're seeing is the number of small businesses getting contracts has actually gone down, but the actually overall spend has gone up. And then it also ensures that the Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilizations have access to senior leadership to make sure that the senior leadership does know that their agencies are not meeting their contracting goals. Next slide. So going into the 8A Business Development Program, these are the qualifications that a business must meet to be eligible. This is an application process. That what we saw was that there's actually a lot of fraud in the program when people would self-certify. So what that means is that even though lots of agencies would want access to that 5% goal, now 12% goal of those federal dollars that are just set aside for minority-owned businesses, what they would do is put a minority as the president of the company, and but it was more of just a figurehead. That person was not actually gaining the requirements or the benefits of the 8A program. They were just kind of in there as a figurehead, while the other owners were gaining a lot of the business development, the contract dollars, all that. So, and then there is the economically disadvantaged part of it is that a individual, the 51% owner, must have a net worth of less than $750,000. Their average income over the last 3 years is $350,000, and then total assets is less than $6 million. So this is a program to really help small disadvantaged businesses really gain access to federal contracting. it gives actually you're assigned a BOS like myself. It's our only program that does that, that will help you with the managerial and technical assistance. Both Fernando, who also works in the Spokane office, and myself, we were actually contracting officers for the Department of Defense. And so we used to award contracts to small businesses. And now with our expertise in federal contracting, we're actually helping small businesses get access to these federal contracts. Another program qualification is demonstrate good character and then demonstrate the potential for success. So such as having been in business for 2 years. So another unique part of this program is that it is a time sensitive program. It is a one-time 9-year program. So we want firms who do apply for the program to at least have been in business for 2 years. So as many people know, that the biggest barriers to entry for federal contracting is past performance and bonding limits. We don't want firms to lose the real benefits of the first couple of years in the program trying to get their first contract so that they can build that past performance, they can build that capacity, they can build the ability to perform on larger contracts. So there is that requirement to demonstrate potential for success. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there's a couple different benefits of the program. One of them is access to business development support. So that's where this is the only program, the Women-Owned Small Business Program, the HubZone program, and the Veteran-Owned Small Business Program do not have the business opportunity specialists. You're assigned myself or Fernando if you're located here in Spokane, or one of our other 2 BOSs if you're located on the western side of Washington, where we can help you navigate the rules and regulations of federal contracting. We can help connect you with contracting officers and contracting agencies in our area. We provide a lot of training to our local 8A firms, and our biggest job is to help these firms grow during that 9 years in the program. Another unique benefit to this program is that normally for federal contractors to set aside a contract for a small business, it's called the rule of 2. So if an agency is doing their market research and they want to set aside a contract for women-owned small businesses, they have to have 2 women-owned small businesses that they know will submit a fair and reasonable price to the federal government and have the capacity to perform that contract. If they meet that rule of 2, what they'll do, and they want to meet that women-owned small business goal, or this could go the same as HubZone and Veteran-Owned, if they do not have that rule of 2 or 2 firms, then they cannot set it aside for those contracts. The 8A program is the only program that has statutory authority that allows a contracting officer to sole source a contract. And the dollar value must be less than $7 million for manufacturing contracts, and then $4.5 million for all other contracts. But this allows an agency, without having to provide a justification of approval for sole source, to actually just offer the contract to the SBA. We would accept it on behalf of our active 8A participant, and then that contracting officer negotiates directly with that 8A program participant. So you don't have to go through the competitive bid process on these contracts. It's a huge benefit for the 8A program, as well as contracting officers, especially at what we see as at the end of the fiscal year. So in that September timeframe for the federal government, they have to spend their money or they lose it. They lose it by September 30th. They're saving themselves a lot of time by being able to sole source with a known 8A contractor that most of the time they've worked with, but not necessarily. Allows them to sole source directly with that, award the contract in a much smaller time frame. When you're actually putting contracts out for bid, you have to evaluate every single bid that comes in. It takes a lot more time rather than going the sole source process. So then finally, it is the only program, as I mentioned, it's a 9-year program. It's once per lifetime of the business. And you're assigned a BOS for that entire nine years. Next slide. So the program objectives, assistance, not only it's the reason why it's called a business development program is that some firms that come into the program, they actually don't get a lot of 8A contracts. They might, as a prime contractor, they might get a lot of subcontracting. Sometimes they're in just such a niche market that you don't see a lot of contracts going the 8A program route, but they also get specialized training that we hire contracts to that is only available to 8A firms. They can contact us as their BOS to help them with managerial and technical assistance, not only for federal contracting, but maybe in the DBE program or other federal, state, county, local contracts as well. In addition, they get access to surplus properties. So for example, if SBA, if we were getting rid of equipment or really any federal agency, it goes to the federal surplus, and every state has one. And actually 8A firms can get access to federal surplus property it's a very discounted rate, or sometimes we can get it for free. Again, government contracting, access to federal government contracting that we've seen direct results that increased from 5% to now 12%, where agencies are looking to significantly award more contracts to small disadvantaged businesses, including the 8A program. And then the biggest thing is that we want these firms to get a lot out of this program during their 9 years so that they're able to thrive in not only the federal marketplace, but in the private marketplace as well. We want them to graduate and get a lot out of the 8A business development program while they're in it. Next slide. So benefits, compete for set-aside contracts and sole source contracts. I discussed the sole source part as well, but I did mention that there are dollar thresholds. So if a agency wants to award a contract above that $4.5 million for services and construction NAICS codes, or $7.5 million for manufacturing NAICS codes, what they have to do is set it aside for competition amongst only 8A program participants. So that means that only 8A firms can submit a bid on an 8A competitive set-aside contract. Another interesting part of this contract or this program is that once an agency offers a requirement to the 8A program, that means that that requirement must stay in the 8A program. So if, for example, military Air Force Base wants to, or awards a grounds maintenance contract, these are recurring services that even after this contract ends, there's going to be a follow-on contract. Once that contract ends, if it's in the 8A program, the agency has to set aside that contract for 8A program participants unless they get approval from SBA to remove that requirement for the 8A program. So that means that an agency wants to take a contract out of 8A program participants' availability and try and set it aside as small business set-aside contracts or women-owned small business set-aside contracts. It's the only program where SBA would have to approve that contract can be removed from the 8A program. And if there are qualified 8A program participants that can perform that follow-on contract, we will not approve it to be removed from the 8A program. And as I mentioned, you are assigned a BOS for the entire 9 years that you're in the program. We are very open with our firms, especially now that we have 4 BOSs in our district. For a long time, there was only 2 of us, but we pretty much have an open door policy with our 8A firms that they can contact us whenever they need help with anything. Another thing is that we have a program that's called the SBA Mentor Protege Program. And this is where a small business will participate or partner up with a large business. And the special benefit to the Mentor Protege Program is that a 8A firm can partner with or joint venture with their SBA established mentor and whatever certificate that the 8A firm holds. So if they're an 8A participant, they're a woman-owned small business participant, they're a hub zone participant. Whatever certification that the protege holds, the actual joint venture will carry that as well. So it's basically a partnership between a large business and a small business, but that joint venture itself can qualify for small business set-asides. And as I mentioned, you get managerial and technical assistance, including business training, counseling, marketing assistant, and high-level executive development throughout your entire participation in the program. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, the qualifications for 8A certification is that it must be 51% owned and controlled by a socially and economically disadvantaged individual who is a US citizen. That 51% disadvantaged individual must have full control and management of the 8A participant. We normally require that 2 years being in business as part of the potential for success. There is a waiver for that. And we also require firms have good character, and that's mainly business character, so that they haven't filed for bankruptcy, that they don't have any bad dings on their business credit report, that kind of stuff. And then there's also contract information and other small business programs. Next slide. So on the first slide, when I started talking about the 8A program, there's one of those statutes that established what is automatically considered a socially disadvantaged individual. And up top, you see designated groups. So if you want to apply for the 8A program and you're a member of one of those designated groups, you automatically meet the social disadvantage criteria. Now we also have non-designated group criteria, and those firms that can be owned by a Caucasian female. We've seen in the underrepresented industry. I've also seen disabled people get into the program as well, and they all perform well in the program. But you can still apply for the 8A program. You just have to establish your social disadvantage. So you have to submit a written narrative showing the preponderance of evidence of chronic and substantial negative impacts to the development of your business. Next slide. So as I mentioned, that this is it's a one-time deal. It's a period of 9 years. A lot of current participants were actually granted an additional year due to COVID. So if you were in the program in between 20 and 2021, then you were granted an additional year to the 8A Business Development Program. So these firms are getting 10 years in the program. The first 4 years are what we call the developmental stage of the program. This is where we want firms to get as much benefits from the 8A program as possible. The next 5 years of the stage of the program is the transitional stage of the program. And the only difference that we have in these two different stages is that we do require a certain percentage of your revenue come from non-8A contract dollars, because once you graduate from the program, you will not have access to those 8A sole source contracts anymore. You won't be able to compete for 8A set-asides. So we do require a certain percentage to help you be viable once you graduate from the program. We don't want all of your revenue to come from the 8A program, and then once you graduate, you don't have other sources of revenue streams to help your firm stay viable. Just to maintain eligibility, firms are required, even after you apply. It's a little different than our other programs that do have applications. You do have to submit an annual update every year just to remain eligible in the program. We want to make sure that you're still meeting that economic disadvantage part of the program, that you're getting benefits from the program. And then any changes as well. We do see changes of ownership. SBA is required to approve any changes of ownership or changes in control for 8A program participants. That is not a requirement for any other of our programs. And then we also do require that firm maintain their SAM and DSBS profiles, which are very important tools if a firm is interested in working with the federal government. The SAM profile is required if you want to get a federal contract. It's also required if you want to apply for a program. And the DSBS profile is basically SBA's website. It's a dynamic small business search. So it's basically our list of all small businesses that participate in the federal government contracting. And it's where we keep our certifications as well. It's also an excellent market research tool that prime contractors and contracting officers use to find qualified business from federal contracts. Next slide. All right. I will pass it back to Joel.
Yeah, that sounds good. Can you hear me, Marvel? I think so. This slide just represents a success story, and there are lots of them. But this particular company, owned by Roger Newton, really, in fact, never planned to start his own business. But after years of his own hands-on construction experience, he branched out on his own, and he founded Newton Building and Development, LLC, in March of 2002. He recognized the opportunities of doing business with the federal government, and he partnered with a previous employer on his first federal contract, which is the way that a lot of small businesses get involved in federal contracting. And from that, he developed an experience base and knew he wanted to do work for the federal government, but he needed a way to access that network. And after seeing the benefits of the SBA 8A program through a previous firm, he applied for and received his 8A certification back in 2005. The combination of that certification and the outstanding project reviews really opened the floodgates for opportunities with the U.S. Navy for Mr. Newton's business. And when he started the SBA 8A program, he was one of only a few African-American owned construction firms doing federal work within the state of Washington. And he does credit the SBA 8A business development program for providing the access and the network that he needed to get started in government contracting. It's a commitment, like any new source of revenue, that a small business owner really needs to commit to. And it does take time, it does take energy and effort. It's certainly not a handout. It's exactly what it is a new source of revenue. And congratulations to Mr. Newton for making that program happen, just like many of our 8A participants. During his time as an 8A certified firm, he had annual revenues beginning at $145,000 in 2005, and they grew to $6.5 million in 2014. And his employees grew from 0 to 15 employees. He's since graduated from our program. He's got a client base which is diversified, and he went from 90% direct work with the U.S. Navy to about 20%, shifting more contracts with large prime companies in the city of Seattle and other nonprofits. So the 8A program for him is not a starting point for someone, it's a business accelerator. So once you're already running a decent sized operation, I have a quote here from then. He said he was lucky because he already got a lot of established contacts with the U.S. Navy when he got into the 8A program. For most firms, he says, it takes years to develop those contacts, and you need to have a solid book of other work going while you wait for your first opportunity. And finally, from him, he said it's really important to do good work. Honesty is incredibly important, and the kind of thing that he would say to his own kid, if we're going to bother to do it, let's do it well. So he says we should be proud of what we're doing. So he's a great example of how this program can work. And with that, I think I can turn this over to, it's going to say, I think, Sean Wilson, but Sean is there, I believe, with Mike Fong. And Mike is going to talk a little bit about the results of our program.
Great. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Joel?
We can hear you, Mike.
Good.
Welcome to the show.
All right. Well, hey, I apologize for being a little bit late to the show, so to speak. I'm actually in Vancouver, Washington today, spending some time visiting with some small businesses in the city, and actually had the chance to sit down and meet with some 8A graduates earlier this morning. So it's very timely. And first of all, I want to make sure I thank Marvo and Ahana and others that have organized this conversation, this summit. Actually, I think Marvo and I met and chatted not long after I started in this role as regional administrator for SBA earlier this year. And one of the conversation topics that we had, and also internally, is just it's a real exciting time and of opportunity in the procurement and government contracting space, and really pleased to see this coming together, this event, and the interest and emphasis in this particular space, because I really do think in the spirit of our strong commitment to equity, that this is one of the tools in the federal government toolbox, and really on down to state and local government, that has proven to be a very powerful way to create economic opportunity, revenue opportunity for underserved communities. So I know you've spent the better part of the last half hour or so walking through our 8A program, and Joel just shared a little bit of one of our success stories, one of the many success stories out of this program. And I know the last couple of slides in the presentation then pivot to a little bit of, well, what are some of the results? And I'm happy to cover that real briefly, but I also really just want to make sure that the few minutes I have to take some time to just really emphasize how I think we have a real interesting moment here, where both as an ecosystem, as government partners, that we can really do something significant in creating additional pathways into these potential revenue opportunities. So with that, I don't know if who's got control of the slides here. We can take a look at the last couple of slides in terms of some of the outcomes we see from our commitments.
Just say the magic word, Mike, and the slides will change for you.
Okay, all right. Well, magic words and magic outcomes. So this slide here it really captures at the full scale federal level, and I want to emphasize some of this very much is really dates back to all the way to the, and perhaps John or Joel talked about this a little bit, but all the way back to the 50s, when the Small Business Act was passed by Congress, which really were the seeds of creating our agency and the seeds of creating the 8A section and program, which is really around the government's ability to contract and procure services from the private sector and small businesses. Over time, the 8A program coming into fruition is one branch of statutory commitments associated with small business contracting, small disadvantaged business contracting that the federal government has committed to. And I'm sure John and Joel have mentioned SBA has the role of essentially monitoring across the board agency utilization of small businesses for contracting. And here, we see as we ladder up the different types of certifications and goals and focus around small business utilization, we have sort of an aggregate goal, small business utilization in the federal government of 23%. And as you can see, at least in the aggregate, 27% of contracting dollars went to small businesses in 2021. And again, that's 154 billion of the roughly 600 billion or so in contracting the federal government spends on an annual basis. On the small disadvantaged business side, you can see that we under the Biden-Harris administration have bumped up that goal up to 15% by 2025. And you can see in 2021, we hitting about 11% of small disadvantaged business utilization. So very proud of that, but we also think there's work to do. And as with anything, once you disaggregate the data, you start peeling it back and see where there's work to be done in particular demographic categories. But in general, we're feeling like we are on track to meet the president's overall target for the federal government. Next slide, Joel. Okay, now taking a little closer look at Washington state contracting. And I want to emphasize the aggregate goal is the nationwide goal around 23% for small businesses and the 15% by 2025 that I mentioned. And I have learned through this process that each state is also very unique as far as its portfolio of potential federal contracting opportunities. So while I am nudging the team on, hey, why is the state achievement number lower than the federal 23%, or SDB utilization, why is that under the 10 or 11% target and laddering up to 15? I'm learning more and more that as not surprisingly, the footprint of federal contracting opportunity and the dynamics are different in every state. So that requires going quite a bit deeper into the details, but I'm sure John and perhaps Fernando and others can shed some light on some of that distinction if folks are interested in diving deeper. But this is to just give a sense of where we're at in those same categories when it comes to Washington State small business utilization. So next slide. Okay, and then as far as 8A firms are concerned, we nationally, there are, I think, about 4,500 to 5,000 8A firms. In the Pacific Northwest, my region has a little over 450 firms active right now. A number of those are Alaska Native corporations, which is probably unto itself its own briefing conversation, but just wanted to note that regional context. And then here are the numbers for our Seattle district 8A firm footprint specifically. And as you can see, we've been hovering around 50, 60 firms over the last couple of years, and then a sense of the number of contract actions and the dollar values awarded through this program. And again, I think this is just a sense of order of magnitude, but also to reinforce that 8A is but one slice and one program specific to this small business contracting space. But as you've undoubtedly learned this afternoon, we think it's a very powerful program, and certainly the anecdotal conversations that I have from graduates generally articulate they really value the time that they had in the program, the opportunities that it presented. But there are also a lot of lessons learned, and to the extent that folks out there might be looking at how 8A could be potentially replicated, there are a few things that are worth sort of highlighting as what we have learned as potentially critical, I'll just call them critical success factors, worth keeping on the radar. I think that's the next slide, but Joel, why don't you go to it and let's see if
Right.
oh, that's not the next slide, but is it the next slide? Okay, that's okay. Let's go back to that last one because I think this is kind of interesting. Per usual, and this kind of starts getting at a little bit of the state by state unique footprint in terms of contracting opportunities. We had talked about wanting to share a little bit about what is the Seattle district, which is largely Washington State, a little bit northern Idaho, to give a sense of which sectors and industries are prevalent in the 8A portfolio space. And as you can see, the pie divided up here, professional services and engineering and construction obviously make up a fairly significant portion. It looks like no percentages here, but it looks like to me, on the order to 75% of the action is in those two categories alone. So, but that gives you a flavor of the types of opportunities that seem to be robust in the 8A space. Next slide. So I mentioned some things that we've learned along the way around 8A and what seems to be some of the critical ingredients we have in place for success. One is that our and I'm not just saying this because it's the agency I belong to, but the investment in the staffing of our business opportunity specialists, Fernando and John and their colleagues, that support directly out of SBA on the ground in the field offices to the 8A firms, I think is really a key piece of why this program is successful. That connection to real person that is effectively, you could call it case management, you could call it, a mentor relationship. That advice that's given on a regular basis, also in terms of engagement of the other federal agencies in terms of potential contracting opportunities, I think is really important. And having a stable and continuity around the staffing support related to the 8A firms. I think most of our 8A current firms and graduates would attest to that support out of our field operations is mission critical to being successful in the 8A program. Second, I want to emphasize is that the statutory empowerment of SBA as an agency around small business contracting, small disadvantaged business contracting, in terms of our authority given to us, not just by statute, but also the administration empowering Administrator Guzman and her team to work with other federal agencies in order to meet their goals, to set those goals, and also identify where there are barriers, I think is a mission critical part of not just the 8A program success, but having SBA in that role and actually empowered is really important as far as the federal government family is concerned, to be able to have that kind of engagement with our sister agencies.
Director, we'd like to thank you. We're over time with the SBA presentation at this.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, so well, the slides can speak for themselves, but appreciate the opportunity to hop on for a little while. So
Well, thank you
go
so
ahead,
much.
Lynn.
We
Yeah.
appreciate it, and we'll look forward to you and your team remaining during the question and answer period so we can respond to our attendees. But thank you. We appreciate it very much.